All right, I will now call this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Flores.
Present.
Senator Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Lang. Senator Nguyen. Here. Senator Hansen. Senator Krasner. Senator Ellison. Chair Scheibel.
Here, thank you so much. Please mark Senator Hansen absent excused. Thank you all for being with us today in Senate Judiciary and for bearing with us as we took a few moments to get organized and all of our technology set up. We are very pleased to have the Secretary of State, Cisco Aguilar, with us this afternoon. We'll be hearing two bills, SB 75 and SB 76. I think most of you know the procedure at this point, but I do see a couple of new faces, so just to be clear, we'll hear them in that order. We'll hear SB 75 first. We'll have a presentation. Members of the committee will be allowed to ask questions of the presenters. Then we will hear testimony in support, opposition, and the neutral position. In our committee, we trust you all to use your best judgment in deciding where to testify on a bill. If you would rather we pass it than not, please testify in support. If you'd rather we not pass it, then please testify in opposition. If you really do not care, but you have some information that you think would be helpful for us, then testify in neutral and give us that information, please. We will be limiting the testimony to approximately 2 minutes per person just to ensure that we can get through all of our business in our committee and allow for the other committees that need to meet today to do so. And with that, I think we are ready to go ahead and open up the hearing on SB 75. And I will turn it over to our esteemed Secretary of State to introduce himself and his co-presenters, and please get started whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, for the record, Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State, CISCO, AGUILAR. I'm joined by Deputy Secretary for Commercial Recordings, Deanna Reynolds, and Chief Deputy Gabriel DeCara for our presentation on SB 75. The Secretary of State's office is the first stop for business licensing in Nevada. Nearly 560,000 businesses file with the Secretary's Business Licensing Management System. And in 2024, these services generated approximately $200 million for the state general fund. The main duties of the division are the processing and filing of organizational and other business documents for entities, including for-profit and nonprofit corporations. Examples are listed on the slideshow. The division also reviews, files, and processes a number of other licenses and registrations, including trademarks and Uniform Commercial Code filings. Since I took office, we have taken major steps to make business easier in Nevada. Thanks to a $15 million allocation from the legislature in 2023, we were able to launch Project Orion, our project to completely overhaul the business licensing portal Silverflume. The system was broken. I've said it before, but you shouldn't have to hire an attorney to deal with the Secretary of State's office. Since we launched Project Orion, we've resolved over 600 bugs in the Silverflume system, finally bringing the product to a minimum viable product. Without these fixes, we would not have been able to serve our customers and begin a complete replacement of the business licensing system. In real terms, it means we have been able to process filings faster than ever, both in-house and online, and even get through a number of filings received as they increased over time. We have also reduced call demand into customer service, and this has allowed time for our teams to provide a higher level of service to every customer, when our business users especially need our help the most. We also implemented self-help tools, which has helped reduce call volume to our customer service teams. Our hold times have reduced from 30 minutes in May of 23 to an average of 5 minutes this past January, and prior to that, it was even longer. This graphic shows our number of filings and the revenue the Commercial Recordings Division and Business Portal are bringing into the state of Nevada. As of November 2024, revenue has increased by 5.3% year over year compared to fiscal year 2024, and 3.5% year over year compared to fiscal year 2023. Overall, in the last 3 fiscal years, the services have brought in over $200 million, as I mentioned before, and we expect those numbers will continue to rise as we implement the new system. Just in February alone, we've generated over $1 million in new revenue. SB 75 is our effort to continue making the business portal more accessible with additional language access, as well as making the existing law more clear and easier to understand. It is also our effort to continue making Nevada more competitive when businesses are looking for a state to incorporate. We want to eat Delaware's lunch. This is a wide-ranging bill aimed at modernization and streamlining the statute related to Nevada State Business License and our Commercial Recordings Division. As you can see, it is an incredibly long bill, but we'll attempt to present it as straightforward as possible. First and foremost, there are a number of fees and fines with their amounts set in statute. As you may be aware, Nevada has one of the most expensive state business licenses in the country. Forming an LLC in Nevada has a $200 business fee, 75 articles of organization fee, and also requires an initial list with a $150 fee. Every year thereafter, an annual list of managers must be filed with the same fees. Nevada has incredible business-friendly climate and a set of laws. We are proud of it. You may have seen headlines recently about companies such as TripAdvisor looking to leave Delaware to incorporate here in Nevada. But to make this growth sustainable, we must be able to respond to the market and the conditions the market presents. Other states have fee holidays where they waive fees in order to spur economic growth, drive employment. Montana just announced that the 2024 annual report fees will be waived for all businesses. While there is a cost to those waivers, they also show businesses that the state is serious about supporting them in difficult economic times. With Nevada's biennial legislative process, we want a solution to be responsive to market conditions. What we are seeking in this bill is the movement of the fee amounts to regulation so that we can be more easily available and ready to address future needs. We do not want the authority to do this unilaterally. Our intent is that the change in fees would need to be approved by the Legislative Commission, still having accountability. And if the bill does not require that as written, we will seek an amendment to do so. The next chunk of the bill relates to accessibility and services. Nevada has a large Latino community that year by year is starting to more small businesses and growing in entrepreneurship. Current law requires anyone filing documents in a language other than English to provide a verified translation. As you have already heard, we are in the process of a complete replacement of the Nevada's business licensing platform. One of the elements we are building into the system is an expansion of translation and language access services to ensure we're on the cutting edge of technology and accessibility for anybody that wants to start a business. We would like the ability to provide forms and receive documents in Spanish and provide the translation ourselves so that there's no barrier to entry for entrepreneurs who may be comfortable conducting business in their native language. The other sections of the bill are focused on cleanup, making it easier for business owners who have appropriate certificates to receive business names that are prohibited without the correct documentation, and unifying the Nevada trademark system with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's worth noting that as large as this bill is, it deals with a large number of chapters in NRS. And there are no shortage of suggestions from the business community, legal scholars, and other interested parties. I fully expect this bill to be amended. I'm sure the legislature, which has many business owners sitting in office, will have further thoughts as well, and I welcome them. We know this bill will grow and change, and we look forward to working with our various constituencies. Our goal here is to make Nevada the best place in the country to do business. We're open to any and all ideas about how to make that happen. That being said, we're available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sure we have questions from members of the committee. I'll start with my Vice Chair, Senator Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary of State, for your presentation. I will say I recently, a year and a half ago, opened a new business, two of them actually, and had the opportunity to see what it was like what you've been doing now with Silver Sloom and all that, to post. And previously, I remember having a very difficult time navigating between different state websites for paying taxes, for registering the business, for doing this and that, to now having it all in one centralized location. and I just really appreciate you doing that. I want to start off with talking a little bit about businesses that operate in different languages. I personally do immigration law. I have to do advertisements strictly in Tagalog or Spanish or different languages myself. So I understand that there's communities that strictly operate in that realm, but that's immigration law. But as I work with different clients, I've noticed that they're opening businesses and that they're doing so many different things. And we have these beautiful hubs all throughout the state that focus on, communities that are coming from Africa or Central America, Latin America, and all that. So I really appreciate that. Do you have a projection? I understand that on the front end, we're talking about translating services, and maybe that would be a cost to you or us in general. But do you have a projection of what it would mean to the state? You mentioned $200 million is coming now for the businesses. Do you have an idea of what you think would happen when we open the market to make it so much easier for all these different folk to come in all these different languages and start opening more restaurants, small businesses that provide services, goods, etc.? What do you think that's going to do for the state?
Thank you, Senator Flores, Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. You're right. What we're looking at is ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our marketplace and our customers. This is solely a business decision. When you look at the multiple languages that are spoken throughout the state, there are multiple. However, there are predominant languages that are spoken, and what we want to do is focus on those predominant languages that exist. And we figured by changing forms into the language that they understand, less errors are made, which requires less administrative time from our team to be able to respond to those errors. But also, too, it encourages people that Nevada is open for business. Some of the greatest minds are some of the individuals that come through our immigration process. And getting them to really commit to business in this community, they're going to start small, they're going to grow, they're going to get bigger, and they're going to employ their neighbors, their community members, and we're going to see a community grow and an economy grow. Majority of our economy in Nevada, I think 99% of all businesses, and I'm not talking about revenue, I'm talking about the number of businesses, are small businesses. And we need to really focus on the 99%. We know the 1% is going to be able to get the services they need because they can afford to hire attorneys. Some of these smaller businesses can't. And what we're trying to do, again, the goal in the Secretary of State's office is modernization, innovation, and transparency. And by doing language access the way we're proposing to do it, we're modernizing the way Nevada operates. We're being innovative at how we're serving our customers, but we're also being transparent with the people we serve and reducing the amount of administrative need so that people can live an efficient life and use government when necessary, but also have government get out of its way as they continue to move forward.
If I may, Madam Chair, if I could bring up one more thing and before I pass it on. I know one of the criticisms that I often hear when working with diverse communities is, oh, well, they don't follow the rules, or they're not getting all the correct licenses, or they're not doing any of that. I would assume that folk that are advocates or proponents for regulation or proponents for everybody kind of playing by the same rules would want a bill like this because it gives them the opportunity to say, look, now we have this in every single language. It makes it a lot easier for folk who were absent in these conversations, who were scared to navigate a system, who were scared to engage in a particular process because they felt that it wasn't accessible, that possibly this now ensures that we're all across the field making it easier to get in, but also all playing by the same rules.
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. You're absolutely right. It's making sure, again, that everybody understands where the sandbox is and how to play in the sandbox. And making sure, again, it comes back to administrative costs, right? Do you want to continue to see the administrative burden increase because we're seeing our economy and we're seeing our communities become more diverse? This is a way to be able to meet our customers where they are. This is solely a market decision. We will also benefit as a state because we'll have revenue increase. And the more we get people engaged in the process, the more we can have a compliance process. But also, too, when somebody becomes official as a business, that allows them to access capital. And when you're accessing capital is already hard enough. But if you bring somebody into the process, you bring them into the system, you bring them into the legitimate business form, they're going to be able to go to a bank and build that capital structure to be able to continue to expand, which only helps our economy. Again, what we're trying to do is eliminate barriers, build efficiency, and allow our state to continue to grow with our small businesses.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to entertain those questions.
Of course. We'll go next to Senator Lang.
Good afternoon. I just wanted a clarifying question. So, on your slide 6, where you talk about the costs from different states, is your office contemplating reducing the cost of business licenses in Nevada?
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. At this moment, no. What we're looking at is being able to have a mechanism to have that conversation with a broader group of individuals.
Okay, great, thanks.
Gabriel DeCare, for the record, Chief Deputy Secretary of State. There are some fees that may need to be reduced. It may come in an amendment to this bill because I'm not sure if it's written in there now. But for example, currently there is I believe a $100 fee to dissolve an entity. As you can see, there are tens of thousands of entities that are in default. They're just sitting on our books and nothing happens with them because no one wants to pay $100 to just clean up our records. That's an example of a fee that we would look at lowering so that we could do a better job and be more accurate with what businesses are conducting business in Nevada. So as the Secretary said, not contemplating the business license fees, but there are some other fees that seem to be hurting more than helping, and those are ones that we'd look at. But again, not without the approval of the Legislative Commission. Thank you, Senator.
Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State, it's looking at some of those fees that are actually less than the administrative burden and eliminating some of those fees, because a lot of what we do now can be done digitally, but they're not done because people don't want to pay the $100 fee. But there's also two fees that are like $2 for a certain document when they could generate it themselves and get it digitally. And the fee is actually an impediment to, and it's actually costs us more in human time, postage, and paper. And so what we're really trying to do is streamline those processes.
So I wasn't advocating to lower the prices because I think your office is doing a really great job. And having worked in the business industry and having to get business licenses, and I remember the horrific days, and it's a much smoother process now, and I just really appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, we will go next to Senator Wynn.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. Can you maybe discuss how other states do this? I imagine there are other states across the country that also allow the adjustment of fees through this regulatory process and this modernization effort.
Thank you, Senator. Gabriel DeCare, for the record. Yes, the way that states do it varies, and we can put together kind of a collection. But for example, the Secretary spoke about Montana earlier. In 2022, Montana cut their business license registration fee in half and then saw a record increase in new businesses applying. And they were able to do that through their administrative code process. So similar to what we're asking to do here. Thank you.
Do any of those other states like Montana or any that you're aware of, do they have any other guardrails that are in place that wouldn't allow you to double or triple the fees if you decided you wanted to? Obviously, I don't think that would probably be in line with your own personal philosophy or any of our states, but are there any guardrails in place in this bill or in other states that prohibit your office from having that type of unlimited authority?
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. There are guardrails. Obviously, we understand that in order to increase fees, there's a certain threshold that we have to meet. We're in discussion with business industry groups and other individuals within the state of Nevada about that exact conversation. Is we may be looking at an amendment to say any fee reduction could go regulatory, any price increase would have to come to the full legislature. And that is a guardrail that we could potentially put in place.
Gabriel DeCare, for the record, as the Secretary said, Nevada already, we already have some of the highest prices in the country as it relates to business licenses and incorporating, and so I think any Secretary would be really hesitant to raise those further, but absolutely we can amend something in if the bill as worded does not satisfy that requirement. Thank you.
All right, we have a few more. I'm going to go best I can in the order that the senators asked me. So I'll go next to Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar, and your staff with you. I appreciate your presentation. So I have received numerous emails regarding this bill, and the biggest concern that I'm hearing is regarding Section 1, subsection 3. The Secretary of State may establish by regulation the amount of the fee that must accompany an application for a state business license pursuant to subsection 2. If the Secretary of State establishes by regulation the amount of such a fee, an application for state business license must be accompanied by a fee in the amount established by the Secretary of State by regulation. So the concern I'm hearing in the emails is regarding the fact that since 1996, the Nevada Constitution has required a 2/3 supermajority of both houses of the legislature, the Senate and the Assembly, to create, generate, or increase any tax or fee. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Great question. And I think we addressed that a little bit earlier, but I'll make it extremely clear. Our intent is not to do this to increase fees. Obviously, we want to preserve the intent of the Constitution. And so one of the amendments or one of the suggestions we're working on with the business groups and the registered agents and the Realtors Association, some of the chambers, is to say, really, if we're going to increase fees, we must bring it to the legislature. However, if we're looking to eliminate or decrease fees, we can do that in a regulatory process.
Have there been any Nevada Supreme Court rulings that state that even modifying a tax or fee needs to have the approval of the Nevada State Legislature that you're aware of? It might be a question.
Thank you, Senator. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State, I would send that to your council.
Thank you, Chair. The answer to that is no. I'm not aware of any decision that relates to that. The constitutional requirement only applies to bills passed by the legislature, so it doesn't apply to regulations, for example. If there were an increase in a regulation, obviously the time an underlying statute is passed, it would have to have the 2/3 vote, such as this bill does.
So a mere modification of a tax or fee does not fall under the given tax restraint rule under the Nevada Constitution? It has to be an increase, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying an increase that's done by regulation is obviously not required to be passed by the legislature by a 2/3 vote. It's, as a regulation, it still has to go before the legislative commission to be approved, but it doesn't have to get a 2/3 vote of the legislature, no, since it's a regulation and not a bill.
Quick follow-up, I apologize. Thank you, Chair. So, and I'm sorry, I'm turning my back and asking legal. So the legislature, what you're saying is must vote to give him the power to make such regulations before it can be done. Is that what you're saying? And that's why this language is in here, this new language?
I would say that's essentially correct. There are a lot of statutes that allow administrative agencies or officers to set fees by regulation. So, and those bills typically, if they have anything that's going to result in an increase in revenue, have a 2/3 vote on them.
Okay, thank you very much. And just one more. Then I'm just wondering why on the cover of the bill it says that it requires a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just, Gabriel DeCara for the record. Thank you, Senator. My understanding is that because you would be giving the Secretary of State's office the authority to potentially raise fees, is that is why that this is a 2/3 bill, but I defer to your counsel in case I got that incorrect.
No, that's accurate.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Sure. We'll go next to Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy, and Deputy Secretary. Thank you for presenting the bill. Throughout the bill, I see language about the Office of the Secretary would be able to accept a filing written in a language other than English if the Secretary determines that sufficient resources are available to provide for a verified translation of that record into the English language. For years, I've been hearing the calls many of us have about our need to diversify our economy, and I'm just wondering if this passes, do you think that'll help spur international investment in Nevada, that folks who might have been hesitant to start a business, come to Nevada, now seeing that it might be more welcome to not have to have that translator at the get-go, might be more interested in investing in Nevada? Do you think this might help us with that diversification of our economy?
Thank you, Senator Cisco-Yolette, Secretary of State. Absolutely. I think it's another tool in our toolbox to be able to respond to market conditions given the way Nevada is designed to operate. And given also, too, you look at the tourism base that's coming to Nevada, you have a lot of significant, business leaders from other countries coming to Las Vegas to conduct transactions, to do deals in Las Vegas because it's an easy place to get to. It's a great place for people to celebrate, but also, too, it's a great place to do business.
Thank you. Brief follow-up, Chair. Thank you. Where I practice law in the courts, sometimes if we have litigants from some countries, sometimes we have a challenge finding translators. Do you think that's something the Office of the Secretary can overcome if, let's say it's, a language that there aren't a lot of translators available in terms of finding those translators?
That's a great point. Thank you, Senator Cisco-Yolette, Secretary of State. I believe we would work extremely hard to identify translators that would be available. Look, we're not looking to do complicated legal documents in a foreign language. What we're looking for is the everyday form that's used to establish a business or conduct business with the Secretary of State's office to be translated into another language. It's not to do larger transactions, like if they're amending their shareholder count or they're amending their ownership group. I think those legal documents would probably have to be in English for now until we start to build up that pipeline of translation or talent within the Secretary of State's office to manage that process.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. We will go now to Senator Ellison.
I lost my button. I do have a question, and it's pertaining to the small businesses. I'm not talking about somebody opening a... Yeah, they had me move this because of my hearing. So the problem they're having on the small business is they don't have the capital. So what they're doing is they're trying to open up. They don't have brick and mortar. So they're trying to do whatever they can to get started, to get revenue in. And when we got some of the highest prices out there, it's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. What we need to do is stick to the brick and mortar and try to get the little people that get them up, get them working, and have them come legally. But, some of these times, these small people, they're living out of pocket. They left a job. They got a little bit of money. They're trying to open up the business. They might be yards. They might be tree trimmers. They might be anything. So them are the ones that I'm worried about. That's the ones that you need to get legal, but sometimes you're looking at the prices out there. And if you look at the costs that you had, that's deterring some of them to wait before they do get a license.
Thank you, Senator Cisco-Yolette. I absolutely understand that concern. That's the point of us trying to do this, is making sure that we're bringing people into the system so that when they do start, as say, for example, some of our street sidewalk vendors, those individuals are the truest forms of entrepreneurship. They're putting everything they have into that cart or that opportunity. They're trying to grow to the next level. And if we don't get them into the process, we don't get them to register with the Secretary of State's office, they can't open bank accounts. They can't open a Venmo account to be able to transact business. But if we give them the opportunity to incorporate in our office, they're going to be able to start to build that credit history with whatever bank they start with. Even if they start with $100, they're going to be able to start to understand the banking system. They're going to start to understand what cash flow means, and then be able to apply for credit to even expand their business and be able to grow. And that's the intent of what we're trying to do, is look at our marketplace. How do we build that economy, and how do we allow them to grow, to move forward? Example, I love talking about streets sidewalk street vendors because it is the truest form of entrepreneurship, and it's easy to understand to go from being a vendor to having a food truck to a bricks and mortar restaurant. That's the progression that every one of those individuals wants. And if we can, at the state level and in government, help them at the very beginning and get out of their way and allow them to go, I think we'll see that industry start to grow, we'll see employment grow, and we'll see, again, entrepreneurs really favoring Nevada.
Well, I look at it a little different. I see hundreds of small businesses trying to start, and they start with zero. They're trying to get the equipment, they're trying to get started, but if they got to get the license to get moving, they've got, what comes first? The wagon or the horse? You know, come on, I think there's got to be some kind of way to get these people in and get them involved, but if they've got to open these fees, and they're trying to get started, sometimes that's almost impossible.
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar. Last session, we did introduce a bill to waive a fee for first-time business owners, especially entrepreneurs or startup companies. Obviously, that was a discussion among the legislature to determine. I agree with you. I think the better off we can get people started, we know within 2 years whether or not a business is going to succeed or fail. And that's, is it $800 really worth it to the state to know that you had an opportunity to grow a business? That's a decision for the legislature to make. I know I have my opinions. As somebody who started a business from scratch prior to being in elected office, it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We didn't have a lot of capital. We were able to raise it finally once we proved our concept, but I think everybody else is in that position as well. And if we could figure out a way to build our startup community, NV Startup, there are startup organizations in this state that would like to see an opportunity for startup companies and entrepreneurs to have that fee waived for either the first year or the second year, to be able to give them that time to do proof of concept, to gather their data, and then be able to go raise capital. So I agree with you completely. I'm trying to find every way we can in the Secretary of State's office to meet the market demands and to be able to grow Nevada from a financial perspective.
I think, was that your last question, Senator? Okay, perfect. I think Senator Nguyen, you had a follow-up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. I think I found it. We're a team up here on the front row. I have some questions kind of following up with some of the language access. I know in other committees we learned that the governor's Office of New Americans has failed to use about 20 of the $25 million that was allocated last legislative session for language access plans, specifically for different state agencies. Is this something that the Secretary of State's office, as we've heard, there's so much opportunity to encourage and make, entrepreneurship and these small businesses flourish in accessing some of those funds to further expand the ability of the Secretary of State's office? And if you've asked for those, if you've applied for those, if you've worked with the governor's office to access those funds, obviously it's always frustrating when we find out that over $20 million has just been sitting there on the table, and then we come into a committee and we hear that there are amazing programs that could have utilized some of those funds to make our state more prosperous. So I'm curious about that.
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Wow, I wish we knew they existed because we would have applied for them. The experience of language access has really come from my opportunity to participate in business roundtables throughout Carson City, Washoe, Clark, and some of our rural communities. Melissa Saavedra has done a great job in putting those together, and that's when I started to really hear the demand for language access. We had individuals coming from communities to say, hey, I want to deal with your office, but English is not my first language, and sometimes I get confused and I make a mistake and I get scared, and then I realize that it's actually costing me more money to apply and then to fix those mistakes. So if there's a way to figure out how to create the forms in our native language, we'll be able to file them correctly and be able to move on. The other thing is, during the election, we are required by federal law to meet certain language standards. And language access was a huge learning opportunity for our office to be able to figure out how we could better serve communities. It was, our Latino community, it was our AAPI community, and being in voting locations where those communities live and see them take advantage of the way we have supported them and see them participate in our democracy as they're entitled to participate was really a cool thing to see. And I thought, this is an opportunity, one, to grow our market, to grow those entrepreneurs, but also to expand what we've learned from the election side. And so if I would have known $20 million existed in other funds, you would have believed I would have been there. And I apologize, I was not aware those funds existed.
Gabriel DeCara for the record, and in fact, not to contradict the secretary, we did ask if those funds would be accessible to our office. We was told that based on the wording of the bill that it did not apply to us, it only applied to executive branch agencies under the governor, I believe, and so we were told that those were not funds we could apply for. So
That's why I didn't know about them.
You have a team there, just like we do with the microphones up here in the front row.
Protects me from myself, so.
Yeah, and I think Senator Flores also has a follow-up, if you don't mind.
Sorry, I was having a difficult time working technology over here. Looks like the mic is good. In talking about opening the door to more businesses participating and leveling the playing field, I forgot to bring up a little bit of the conversation around EB-5 and targeted employment areas for the conversations that we all join in. Often investments come in from out of the country, what they call the $1 million investor visas. But I bring up that point because I know EB-5 money has been used to build casinos, huge properties, hotels, bring a significant amount of investment to the state and the country in general. Do you see maybe even those, I know we're really focused on empowering local Nevadans who are here now and they want to do things correctly but are having a hard time navigating the process, which is difficult for everybody in general, but sometimes the language barrier makes it that much more difficult. But do you foresee, even in that conversation, which would be in alignment with the conversation happening at the executive level? I know the governor has very focused on bringing investment from outside of the state. Do you see this moving in that direction as well, that now you're making it easier for significant millions and possibly even larger than that investments that will create hundreds of jobs, now realizing Nevada is open for business because we're trying to the extent possible, put all these documents in a language where an attorney maybe in China or in Mexico or Europe can say, we can navigate a lot of the registration docs now because we don't have to hire a local attorney or translating service because Nevada is making it that much easier for millions of dollars from around the country to come in.
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. You're exactly right. It's an incremental process, right? We have to start somewhere, and this is the beginning, by starting with general applications that are available to the public in alternative language that are spoken in those communities, figuring out how to work in those ways, and learning, getting lessons learned, and then progressing to getting even stronger and moving down a chain. It's not something you can implement overnight. It's something that we have to incrementally build. And this is the first step in making that happen. It's the first step of designing a new system with language access in mind. We have engaged a language access expert in the design of that system because what happens most of the times is government agencies build these systems and they go, oh, then let's bring in the language access. In reality, you need to bring the language access in during the design phase to be able to make sure the system is designed to flow coherently. Again, these are incremental steps. Yes, I'd like to get to that ultimate goal where EB-5 investment dollars are coming here and they're moving their corporations to Nevada from their home countries. That's the ultimate goal because then we all win. But you have to start here to get to here, and that's what our intent is in our plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for entertaining the second round.
Absolutely. Any other questions from members of the committee? I just have two kind of questions and comments, one on each section of the bill. So since we're talking about language access, I'll start with language access. And it's more of a comment, but I'd be interested if you have anything to elaborate on. The Secretary of State's office would not be the first governmental agency to do business in multiple languages. And even in the state of Nevada, you would not be the first entity to accept official documents in a language other than English. I'm thinking specifically of like the work that I do in criminal justice when I meet with victims of crime and they've interacted with a police officer speaking their native language. They may have filled out a witness statement in Spanish. We have witness statements now that ask for their name name, date of birth, address, all of that in Spanish, which can be completed in Spanish, filed in Spanish, provided to the court in Spanish, because that is a more accurate way to ensure that we are really taking their words appropriately and truthfully without having errors in the translation earlier in the process. We want to do the translation in some ways as late in the process as possible. I don't want to say as late in the process as possible, but you want to have that translation be as accurate as possible. So I'm wondering if you feel like these changes, allowing the documents to be filed in multiple languages, would really bring you in line with other agencies and move us forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Not only does it bring us in line with other agencies, it actually brings us in line with our office, because we're doing some of this work already on the election side, and we've seen the benefit of it from the election side. So just bringing the office in parity from our different divisions that exist.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. And on the fees, I also just wanted to clarify that when we're talking about the necessity for the legislature as a whole to vote on a fee increase versus the legislative commission to approve a fee increase through regulation, there are hundreds, I'm pretty sure there are thousands of fees that we get charged every single day that the legislature doesn't vote on. When I go to, file a lawsuit in court and I pay my administrative assessment fee and my filing fee and my courthouse facilities fee, the legislature hasn't voted on every single one of those fees, right?
I assume no. But
And my follow-up was going to be, and you have similar fees, right? It's not just the business license fee. You were talking about fees to file a document, to retrieve a document, so it's not just one fee that we're talking about.
that's correct, Senator. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. There are multiple fees that are throughout the incorporation process and post-incorporation. You have certificates of good standing. We just went through a rash of requests for certificates of good standing among our nonprofit communities because there was a big grant due, and the grant required the applicant to file a certificate of good standing. And so when we're looking at those fees and we're redesigning the system, there's a more efficient way to design the system to be able to get the applicant what they need. Some of these fees were designed when we were at a very mechanical administrative process. Now that we're entering a digital world, some of these fees no longer make sense what we're trying to accomplish. And to come to you to ask you to eliminate a $5 fee or a $2 fee or I think, one, it's not efficient use of your time. It's not an efficient use of government resources. And so we just want that flexibility to be able to respond to market conditions.
Thank you so much. And with that, I think that completes all of our questions for today. We really do appreciate all of you being here to answer those. And with questions being completed, that brings us to our testimony on SB 75. We'll first invite anybody wishing to testify in support of SB 75 in person in Carson City down to the witness table up front, as well as anybody in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of SB 75 up to the witness table up front. I'm not seeing anybody coming up in person, so we'll go to the phones, please, for testimony in support of SB 75.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of SB 75, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers wishing to offer support testimony at this time.
All right, then we will move to opposition testimony on SB 75. If there's anybody wishing to testify in opposition to SB 75, now is the time to make your way to the witness table here in Carson City or down in Las Vegas. Go ahead and take a seat. We will start here in Carson City. I'll let you figure out what order you will go in. And as a reminder, please turn on your microphone. We do have new microphones. The buttons kind of look like a sticker that was dropped on the table in front of you. And when you press it, it will turn red. Red means hot, as in your mic is hot. And then you can give your name and its spelling before about 2 minutes of your testimony. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yolanda Canuck, I'm here representing myself. I'm opposed as it is written. I would only be willing to support it if those guardrails would be in place that he talked about, like if there's going to be increase in any of the taxes or fees, that would need the 2/3 vote of the legislature.
I don't see a microphone in the middle. Maybe I can't discern with all the things there. Sorry. My name is Janine Hansen. I'm the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. I was certainly pleased to hear the Secretary's explanation of the bill, and I appreciate his concerns that he is responding to some of the things the people have. My biggest concern is that when we take this out of the legislature having to vote on it, it doesn't just mean that the Secretary can lower fees, but there might be a new Secretary in the future. I'm sure at some point in time there will be. And we have to be concerned about what happens then. And so if they are allowed to circumvent the Constitution and the constitutional requirement that the legislature has to vote on this fee, which obviously they have done in the past, I think it's very important that we have significant guardrails. And I think that the legislature voting is the most important one. Now, I've been a citizen lobbyist, and I've attended the legislature every session since I was 19. But I have very rarely participated, and I have done it, but not too often. I have participated with the Legislative Commission. And so I think if it's going to really be transparent for the people, it's much better that it's at the legislature. And so we are concerned about that. Now, if he wants to lower fees, I'm all in favor of it. That's wonderful, and we support that, especially some of these ones that are just administrative, that are so small. And so we appreciate him wanting to do that and increase business in Nevada. Those are all good things. But we are concerned about circumventing the Constitution on raising the fees for business licenses, and I do have 2 business licenses, one with the state of Nevada myself, so I have gone through the process. The one last thing I would say is that we understand there's issues in languages, but America is a melting pot, and we've had to, America is a melting pot, but we need things that hold us together as a nation and as a people. And one of the most important things that holds us together as a nation and a people is a common language. And when we do everything in other languages other than English, it tends to undermine our common heritage and our common language. And instead of uniting us, it often disunites us, which is a problem in our nation, which we need to be aware of. So I just want to put that on the record, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Joy Trushenski, Trushenski. I'm a non-paid lobbyist for conservative causes. I do not approve of SB 75 because it would allow the Secretary of State to set amounts of business licenses fees by regulation. This is another attempt to give more power to the Secretary of State and circumvent the power of the people. Currently, the Nevada Constitution requires a 2/3 vote by both houses of the state legislature to pass any fees or tax. I do not want that to change. Also, this bill allows the Secretary of State to accept filings in any language other than English. English is the common language of this country since our founding. And I agree with Janine that when we don't have a common language, that will separate us. I want to say that illegal immigrants must know English in order to understand our history and Constitution and become U.S. citizens. Therefore, I think we should just have English concerning business licenses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anybody else coming to the front to give testimony in Carson City. I don't see anybody coming to the table in Las Vegas either, so we will go to the phone for testimony in opposition to SB 75.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide testimony in opposition to SB 75, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
CYRUSHOJJATY. I hope you guys can hear me. There's something that's on. I oppose this bill. I will ditto the previous comments. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. My name is Jim DeGraffenreid, JIMDEGRAFFENREID. I'm Nevada's Republican National Committee man, and I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Republican Party in opposition to SB 75 in its current form. Our party platform states that we support lower taxes and fees and a reduction in the scope of government at all levels. Of course, we understand the government must have income to perform its functions, but Nevadans have protections against excessive taxation, as was discussed at length earlier. We appreciate that conversation, and particularly the questions by Senator Krasner to clarify that intent. We look forward to seeing the language of the amendments the Secretary referred to earlier. We support the goal of making Nevada more business-friendly, and we look forward to being able to support this bill if the amendments preserve our constitutional protections. Our platform further states that we support legislation affirming English as the official language for conducting business at all levels of government. Yet 10 different sections of this bill each change the law to allow the Secretary to accept documents for filing that are not written in English. This is prohibited under current law unless the document is accompanied by a verified translation. Public records and filings need to be readily available and understandable to all Nevadans, and these changes make public records less accessible and verifiable. Again, we look forward to reviewing amendments to see if we can support this bill. Thank you.
There are no further callers for opposition testimony at this time.
All right, then that will take us to our neutral testimony on Senate Bill 75. If you have neutral testimony here in person in Carson City, please go ahead and come down to the front table. And I will let you pick the order in which you testify. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Good to see you all. For the record, Trey Abney, TRAYABNEY. I am the Nevada State Director for NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business. Here in neutral today, but certainly appreciated certainly the Secretary's presentation and what he's trying to do. Like Senator Flores, I've formed my own businesses over the year and just formed one just in the last couple months. And I can tell you it used to be very clunky and difficult to get through. And so anything that the Secretary and his team can do to make that easier, we appreciate. I think that, you know, it was also sobering to Senator Ellison's point to see the comparisons of our business license fees versus other states, and I'm glad that the Secretary is willing to look at that. We are neutral as of right now, and with all the questions having to do with how the fees are raised, are lowered, and the process for that, I think this conversation has gone in a really great direction. We have appreciated certainly the fact that fees are maxed or capped in state law and providing those protections, but love the idea of giving the Secretary the flexibility of lowering those fees and changing some of those if he thinks that would make it better to do business here. So certainly waiting to see the amendments and what results from the conversation here today. I think we're moving in the right direction. Madam Chair, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, committee members. For the record, my name is Matthew Taylor, M-A-T-T-H-E-W, last name Taylor, T-A-Y-L-O-R. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Registered Agent Association. Commercial Registered Agent Association, if you don't already know, represents the vast majority of companies that are registered here in the state of Nevada. We're here testifying neutral today on Senate Bill 75. I would like to acknowledge with high praise the steps that the Office in Commercial Recordings has already taken. They've greatly improved both the commercial recordings and the overall interactions with their office. We'd also like to thank the sponsors of the bill for the stated intent to be able to have some flexibility, respond to different events that are in competing markets, and given the flexibility to reduce or lower fees or have some incentives to be able to do that. We're confident, based on the conversations that we've had with the office, as well as the testimonies we've heard today, that this bill is intended to allow for potential fee incentives, not increases. And upon seeing if there's an amendment that supports or clarifies that topic, we look forward to supporting this bill in the future. Here to if there are any questions, if you have it.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Paul Maratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is currently neutral on SB 75. We did meet with the Secretary of State's office, and we appreciate their time and clarification on the tenet of the bill and regarding also several of the sections about the workload and the needs of the community, so appreciate that. The reason we're currently neutral is regarding Section 1 and subsection 3, regarding the need for clarification language that any rate changes would go to the Legislative Commission. So we look forward to working on that amendment with the Secretary of State's office and having that quickly resolved, since it's a technical amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Brian Wachter with the Retail Association of Nevada. We too are neutral on the legislation. There are a lot of good things in SB 75. I think the language issue is one. Anytime that we can level that playing field, the economy can be an amazing equalizer for anybody who wants to put the time and effort into building themselves a business. And so we appreciate the ability to make it easier for other folks to be able to engage in business in Nevada. Our immigrant communities are some of our largest communities of retailers, and any time that we can allow a business to comply with the laws that you guys have stated down makes it easier. Oftentimes we find our small members are a little bit in trouble, not because they don't want to be compliant, but because oftentimes it's difficult for them to understand how to be compliant. And so all of those are great things. We do, however, share the concern on transferring the authority from setting those business license fees from currently at the legislature to the Secretary of State. I believe his office is subject to the Administrative Procedures Act, and so while there are opportunities to be able to influence, I think, that decision making, we are concerned that such a large fee that goes to the general fund is something that might be reserved to the legislature. Even an amendment moving to the Legislative Commission or to IFC negates some of the representatives that our businesses live and work and are in your districts, and not all enjoy representation on some of the interim committees. And so we do think that for something this important, we are still wrapping our heads around how that transfer of authority from the legislative to the executive makes sense, and we look forward to looking at some of those amendments to see if some of our anxiety can be assuaged. So we appreciate the time, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I don't see anybody else coming to the table, either in Carson City or Las Vegas, to give neutral testimony on SB 75. So we will go to the phones for neutral testimony on SB 75.
Thank you. If you would like to provide neutral testimony for SB 75, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers wishing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of testimony, and we'll take a few closing remarks from our sponsor, Secretary of State, Francisco Aguilar.
Thank you, Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. On the language access thing, if you look at it from a pure administrative standpoint and a cost perspective, the amount of cost that is a burden on an individual and our staff to deal with the mistakes that are made because somebody doesn't understand what they're understanding, what they're doing. But if we can simplify the process, make government efficient, it's going to bring those costs down for everybody, and we're going to be able to have additional resources to assist businesses that really need the assistance. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the conclusion of the hearing on SB 75. I will now close this hearing. I will open up the hearing on SB 76, and what do you know? It is our Secretary of State, Cisco Aguilar, presenting this bill, and he is already down at the witness table. I think he has some other co-presenters coming down to join him. Whenever you are ready, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. Good to see you again. For the record, I'm Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. It's a pleasure to be here to introduce SB 76. I'm joined by Deputy Secretary for Securities, Aaron Houston, and Chief Deputy Gabriel DeCara. We are here today to give you a brief overview of the Secretary of State's office in its role in the business of Nevada's business, and specifically, Securities Division, SB 76. Our bill to establish a victim restitution fund for victims of securities fraud. The Office of the Secretary of State, can you move this slide, please? We're here today to give you, The Office of the Secretary of State is one of the original constitutional offices established in the Nevada Constitution. It is responsible for maintaining official records of the acts of the legislature and the executive branch. Over time, additional duties have been developed. Some are well known, such as being the Chief Officer of Elections and Register of Business Entity Filings. Some areas are less known, such as the administration and enforcement of the Uniform Securities Act, our role in administering the Notary Chapter, Nevada Lockbox Program, document preparation, domestic partnerships, and the business portal. I will now turn it over the presentation to Deputy Secretary for Securities, Aaron Houston.
Thank you. Aaron Houston for the record. We are here today to talk about our Securities Division and its responsibilities. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, thank you. NRS 90 is the Nevada Securities Act, which is where Nevada has adopted and codified the Uniform Securities Act, a version of which has been adopted in all 50 states. The Nevada Commodities Act is also found in NRS 91, which we administer as well. The main function of the Nevada Securities Act is to protect Nevada investors by licensing the professionals who recommend investment products, who provide advice about investment products to buy, and to register the investment products themselves, in order to provide a mechanism for the everyday investor to learn more about the company into which they're investing. NRS 9570 and NRS 9590 also prohibit fraud in the connection with the sale of a security. Every violation of NRS 90 is a Category B felony. The Securities Division is made up of three main sections: the Registration and Licensing Team, the Examination Team of Civil Investigators, and our Criminal Investigations Team. Registration and Licensing handles applications for licensing from broker-dealers, investment advisors, and for the licensing of the securities. And the Examination Team, made up of civil investigators, is responsible for conducting inspections of Nevada-based broker-dealers and Nevada-based investment advisor firms. Our third division is our Criminal Investigations Team. We have 7 post-certified peace officers plus a chief officer who investigate criminal violations of NRS 90, most of which are fraudulent investment offerings of various types. Securities fraud is defined in NRS 9570. In short, it's when a person invests money based on a misrepresentation or a material omission of relevant information. Here's an example of a common scenario. An individual with a very low net worth or low salary is enticed to invest in a new local startup with a promise of a high rate of interest as a return. Unfortunately, the offer itself was premised on fake statements or misleading information or missing information. And when the investment fails, the individual is completely out of luck in terms of recouping their money. When that happens, our investigators recommend a charge of securities fraud against the bad actor. Those cases are prosecuted by the Office of the Attorney General in conjunction with our investigation. When the cases result in a guilty verdict, restitution is often included as a part of the overall sentence for the guilty party. That brings us to SB 76, which proposes to establish a victims restitution fund for victims of securities fraud. The Nevada Constitution provides for restitution to victims of a crime. However, many guilty parties in securities cases have no money with which to make their victims whole, even in a civil proceeding. For example, for fiscal year 23, the division received complaints of securities fraud from investors totaling over $16 million, and in fiscal year, that number was almost $10 million. In contrast, in fiscal year 23, investors received restitution in the amount of $205,000, and in fiscal year, it was just over $1 million. SB 76 aims to fill that gap. SB 76 creates a fund out of monies received as penalties from administrative orders arising from violations of NRS 90, which is the Uniform Securities Act. Nevada residents who are victims of securities fraud and for whom an award of restitution has been made in a criminal adjudication can then apply for a small amount of recompense from the restitution fund. Most victims of securities fraud receive very little money or no money back from their original investment.
The main reason we are proposing this legislation is that it provides a way for Nevada residents to obtain desperately needed relief after losing what is often a significant chunk of their savings to someone who has defrauded them. Often, victims of security fraud are in the most vulnerable communities, especially our senior communities and other adults who live on fixed incomes. Due to bad actors, they can lose their life savings. This bill aims to help them get back on their feet. Most of the time, there is no money left for the victim after the fraudster has taken their money. Even if the victim successfully sues in civil court, there is no money left to satisfy the victim's judgment.
This legislation is based off of a model rule created by NASA, which is the North American Securities Administrators Association. NASA considered feedback from state securities regulators, from trade associations, representing broker-dealers, and from representing investment advisors, and also from bar associations representing attorneys for public investors. So far, it has been enacted in Indiana, Maine, Montana, North Dakota, Ohio, and Vermont. SB 76 proposes to divert a fractional amount of revenue that presently goes to the state general fund to a separate fund held for victims of securities fraud. In the past, the Securities Division has received close to $200,000 per year and sometimes much more through administrative enforcement actions. Only victims who have been awarded restitution as set forth in NRS 9640 could apply for relief from the fund. Under SB 76, applicants who have been awarded restitution through a criminal conviction can apply for repayment through monies collected in this fund up to a maximum of $25,000. Of note, up until a few years ago, revenue in the consideration today was maintained within the Securities Division to be used by the Securities Division and only recently was diverted to the State General Fund.
Before we finish, I want to point out the revenue from the enforcement actions is a very small percentage of the revenue earned from Securities Division. The Securities Division has brought in over $30 million each year for the last 3 fiscal years. In FY22, it was over $35 million. We are also introducing a small conceptual amendment capping the fund at $500,000 that would otherwise go to the general fund. We understand that revenue is important to the state, and we want to support the state, and want to make sure we are not diverting too much funding away from the state at large. Chair Scheibel, thank you for inviting me to present AB 76 to the committee today, and I hope the committee will support this measure. It's needed. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee members may have.
Thank you so much. I think we will have some questions, and I just want to preface this by saying that, of course, we are a policy committee here in the Judiciary. We're not the money committee, which means that we don't make the ultimate decisions about where money goes in the state or how our budget is designed. However, that doesn't mean that we are not allowed to talk about money in this committee, and we are absolutely allowed to consider policy discussions about where money comes from, where money goes, how we spend our money, because that's an expression of our values as a state and our choices as legislators. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that absolutely it's an appropriate topic for discussion, even though we are not a money committee. So with that being said, I will go to the first questions. I think Senator Orenshaw has one. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Secretary, for presenting the bill. I really like the idea of trying to make the victims whole, or at least trying to get some percentage of that way. And I'm just wondering if SB 76 passes, you mentioned that you thought the victims might not be 100% recompensed for their losses, but a percentage. And I wonder, what percentage do you think? I mean, would it be just basic living expenses so that they're not, without any resources? Or if this passes, what kind of percentages do you think you might be able to help those victims?
Thank you, Senator Cisco-Aguilar, Secretary of State. The maximum they can receive is $25,000. And if you look at annual cost, that's not anywhere near what they would need, but it actually helps them get back on their feet.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Chair.
Other questions? Vice Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also have a scenario where we referred a constituent over to your office, and I know that you're helping them. So I wanted to say thank you for that work that your office is doing. I'm curious to know, I know so often we know the victim, but we don't know who did the crime, right? Because they utilized a WhatsApp. I know there's so many things that happen through there, or some social media connection, or an email, and the money's gone, and we never get to prosecute, unfortunately. I'm curious to know when somebody comes to your office, how many of those do you get to see all the way through, and how many of them do you just have to stop and say, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do? Because I know the worst thing you can tell a victim is, we know you were a victim, we know it happened, you have all the evidence, but there's absolutely nothing you can do. And then they feel that nobody cares, right? And how this plays into that you can say, look, we understand, we believe you, all of it is true, but now we at least have a little bit of resources that we can put back to help you a little bit, just to get off your feet, as Senator Orenshall mentioned. I was curious to that, and then I'll turned off. Also, on the other side of it, that we're not going to prefer to pay off $25K in lieu of doing the investigation. That's obviously not the intent, to preemptively get to that point.
Thank you, Senator Aaron Houston, for the record. Those are both really great questions. I can answer the second question first. I don't think that it would be an effect of this bill that we would just push people off into the Securities Restitution Fund and not do an investigation, for the primary reason that there is a requirement that they have an order for restitution in order to make a claim from the fund. So we would need to still go through the investigation and refer for prosecution. As for your first question, unfortunately, you're absolutely correct. It is often hard to investigate and then find a person to prosecute who lives in this country. We have developed investigatory techniques that are very efficient at finding the bad actor. Oftentimes they are in a different country, so it is hard to prosecute those individuals. However, NRS 90 also provides for a restitution award through civil means as well. So if you have a complainant who's willing to go through the civil process, have somebody served in another country, go through the entire process and receives an order for restitution civilly, they could also make a claim on this restitution fund, which is why I think it would be particularly helpful. We have so many people who are victimized every day by somebody they meet in a comment section online, and then they go to WhatsApp and the money is gone before we even know that it happened. So that's why it's particularly important that they can make a claim for restitution through a civil restitution award as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cisco-Aguilar, Secretary of State. I think it's also important, sometimes it's hard for a victim to come forward. And with the Victim Restitution Fund, hopefully this would encourage them to come forward, because the more information that we have and the more we have instances of examples of this occurring, we can get that person off the streets, we can get them out of the market quicker. And this is hopefully an opportunity for somebody to want to come forward. And when they want to come forward, we can then do the job we need to do.
Thank you. I think Senator Ellison had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got a big book you're going to write? Just joking. Okay, one of the questions I've got, it seems like to me that the United States could do a lot better at this, what they do, either through FBI or whatever. But there's thousands and thousands of these across this country that is scamming, mostly seniors. And I think the United States got to step up the plate and say, okay, We're going to go into these countries, we're going to investigate it, and then we're going to prosecute them. And you're not going to prosecute them over there, so you're going to have to bring them back here. That's just a guess that I've got. But the one of the things that I was going to ask you also is, how many cases do you guys do a year with the 7 investigators you got?
Thank you, Senator Aaron Houston. For the record, on average, we do about 80 cases on the criminal side each year. On average, we have about 150 to 200 cases every year that come into the Securities Division for both sides of the House. That's civil investigations and criminal investigations as well.
Well, thank you. I just think whatever we got to do to, narrow this down. When they know that the United States is going to come after them for fraud, a lot of that's going to stop.
Thank you, Senator Cisco. You led Secretary of State. We do work hand in hand with the FBI and other agencies throughout our criminal partners or investigative partners to apprehend some of these individuals. We work in partnership. We recently settled a case that Nevada led the investigation that impacted several states, and we were able to recoup a significant amount of money for each of those states. And because of the work that Erin and her team did, we received compensation to reimburse the state for that work.
Other questions from members of the committee? I have a couple of questions. Could you put a dollar amount on the total restitution orders that were issued in 2024 or 2023?
Madam Chair, Aaron Houston for the record. Thank you for the question. So for the fiscal year 23 and 24, we had approximately, rounding down actually, over $10 million in losses claimed through our Office in Criminal Complaints. Now, this is an unverified, these are not 100% accurate, but those are what investors have claimed to us as their losses. We've had approximately $760,000 in restitution ordered for victims through criminal prosecutions. And of that $760,000 that was ordered from the perpetrator, only $205,000 was collected. These numbers are what I was able to find out through going through the criminal complaints. We don't prosecute the cases in-house ourselves, so those numbers are the best estimate I could find.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying there were $760,000 approximately ordered in restitution through criminal convictions. About $205,000 was actually paid out, leaving about $555,000 outstanding. And is that why we're looking at a $500,000 cap on this fund?
Thank you, Senator Cisco. That is just a number we thought we could, again, it's incremental, right? We want to get to a bigger number, but understanding the financial situation of the state and understanding our needs and priority for this program, we wanted to be respectful. And that's why we recommended a $500,000 cap. What we're also asking for is an opportunity to take third-party funds. Sometimes when there is mass litigation, they look for places to deposit the proceeds of those funds. Also, too, if there's an individual who's generous, like a JP Morgan Chase, that understands what we're trying to accomplish, they'd make a contribution to the fund.
I heard you suggesting that JP Morgan Chase might want to make a contribution to this fund. Okay, and I just need to clarify again, the idea here is not to take money from the general fund and invest it in this victim fund, but take money that is already on its way to the general fund and catch like $500,000 of it first, hold it back in this securities fraud fund. And the money that we're talking about are the civil penalties that people are paying who are not convicted of crimes, but who are engaging in unlawful behavior around securities.
That is absolutely correct. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think those are all of my questions, and I think those are all of the committee's questions, so we very much appreciate you being here to present to us. It's time again to go to testimony. We will start with testimony in support in person, so in both Carson City and Las Vegas, you're welcome to come up to the table right now. And we will start in Carson City with in-person testimony. Again, as a reminder, we have 3 chairs but only 2 microphones, so you'll have to play musical chairs down there. We don't have audio today for the musical chairs, but please go ahead whenever you are ready.
All right. Hello. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Jessica Padron. Last name spelled P-A-D-R-O-N, Padron. I'm here today as the Advocacy Director, accompanied back there by our State Director of AARP Nevada. So my testimony is as follows. We are here eagerly, along with some of our lead advocate volunteers in Southern Nevada, to testify in strong support of the establishment of the Security Estates Restitution Fund for victims of fraud. It's a critical imperative that will provide much needed financial relief to those who have fallen victim to securities fraud. Fraud is a growing threat, and not just a financial issue, it's a crisis that threatens the livelihoods of hardworking Nevadans, particularly, as Senator Ellison said, older adults who are on fixed incomes. According to the Federal Trade Commission, in Nevada alone, consumers reported over $113.6 million in fraud losses in 2023. Our state ranks third in the nation for total fraud reports, and securities fraud is especially devastating, often targeting retirees who have spent decades saving for their future, and only to see their life savings wiped away by unscrupulous actors. So many fraud victims have no way to recover their stolen funds, particularly when perpetrators are insolvent or cannot be located. So I feel like the work here, or we know, the work here that the Secretary is doing with his office would offer a financial lifeline to folks to have an opportunity to get some of that back. And it would be a financial lifeline. This fund is designed to be self-sustaining and financed through penalties and fines collected through those who violate securities laws. So we feel this is a great financial solution, and as the Secretary said, capping it at $500,000. So if they do get large amounts, all that will be continuing to go to the state general fund. This would be protecting the most vulnerable. Older Nevadans are disproportionately affected by financial fraud, often suffering greater losses than younger victims, even though statistically, according to the AARP Fraud Watch Network, younger folks are victims of fraud more often. It's usually not your entire savings account. And the key piece of this bill that I would really like to highlight to all the members on this committee is the fear and shame and lack of available support many victims feel when reporting fraud. To Senator Flores's point, some of them, feeling like they just get a shrug, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. This would address that. And the more people that report, the more the state is able to follow those trends and capture more of these criminals, as we've seen through our statistics and reports with our partners in the FBI and through our National Fraud Watch Network. Finally, by ensuring that victims have a means of restitution, we strengthen trust in Nevada's financial system, encouraging investment and economic stability. A strong consumer protection framework makes Nevada a leader in fraud prevention and would help us address that number 3 in fraud in the country, setting a precedent for other states to follow. So our call to action is that the creation of this fund is not just good policy, it's the right thing to do. And fraud victims should not be left to suffer the consequences of crimes committed against them. The Nevada Legislature has the opportunity to take meaningful action by passing this measure and standing up for justice, accountability, and financial security. So on behalf of AARP Nevada and the countless Nevadans who have suffered from financial fraud, we urge you to support the Secretary of State's Restitution Fund and vote yes on SB 76 to provide real relief to victims who need it the most. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Good afternoon. My name is John McGlamery, M-C-G-L-A-M-E-R-Y, and I'm retired from the Nevada Attorney General's Office, Bureau of Consumer Protection, as a Senior Deputy Attorney General. For 4 years in that position, I prosecuted securities fraud cases. In most of these cases, the fraudsters had either spent or hidden the proceeds of their theft, so there was no victim restitution. Because of this, I highly recommend passage of this bill. The only concern I have is with the funding aspect. I recommend that most monies collected by the Secretary of State's office in the administration of securities laws, including fees for the registration of securities brokers and dealers, be included in the funding of this restitution fund until the fund is on financial ground. Perhaps the most frustrating thing about securities fraud prosecution is the attitude of the courts. Some judges have expressed the opinion that frauds where thousands or even millions of dollars have been stolen should be handled as mere civil cases instead of being handled as crimes. Since the scammers have usually either spent the money or hidden it, the victims have no way of recovering their losses, even in a civil case. The judges are happy to jail a drug user or a shoplifter who's either has hurt nobody but themselves or has stolen just a few dollars worth of merchandise. They'll jail them in a second. But a scammer who is a criminal will get no jail. I prosecuted 10 cases in the 4 years that I prosecuted securities fraud. Only in 2 cases did I get restitution. The other 8 were put on probation, and after the probation was done, the courts let them off. In other words, nothing happened. But the victims, they've lost their life savings. Or even worse, they really are in a bad shape afterwards, both mentally and financially. This is why I have been basically in support of this bill, since it will allow victims some relief from their losses. But I want to make sure there's enough money in the fund to do that. Otherwise, they're victimized again by not being able to get restitution. Thank you for letting me testify regarding this matter, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
It sounds like Senator Ellison does have a question for you. So since you offered, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, and I totally agree with you. It's I've seen this even in our own family that they've got hammered, but you're right. If you got just a small amount, they should be able to go in and try to get as much back to the victims as they can. And I don't know if the state would consider that as a friendly amendment or what, but I totally agree with you, because if they don't stop it, it's going to keep growing.
Well, I get mad because the courts won't do anything about it.
If you could state your name for the record.
Oh, John McGlammer, I'm sorry. Is that I had one case where the court jailed somebody, and that's after he promised to pay restitution, and after 5 continuing hearings, finally jailed him. And he had the money. We knew he had the money, and he just wouldn't pay it back. And the judge finally threw him in jail. But 9 others, nothing happened. And that's ridiculous. It's outrageous.
All right. I appreciate your answering these questions, and I appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you for letting me testify today.
We will move on to the next person in line to testify. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Donna Klontz, spelled C-L-O-N-T-Z, and I too am a former prosecutor and a member of AARP, Nevada's Executive Council. I'm here to strongly support SB 76, which will be a key tool to help capture more criminals by encouraging more reporting of fraud and will provide much needed restitution to victims of fraud in Nevada. I spent 10 years in courtrooms as a prosecutor protecting the rights of crime victims, and getting restitution is often equal to getting justice for a victim. As a senior, I have seen firsthand the devastating impact of securities fraud on retirees. Many of us have worked hard to save for our retirement only to have our financial security threatened or eliminated by fraudsters. SB 76 is crucial for several reasons. The bill provides a safety net for seniors who fall victim to securities fraud, helping them to recover at least some of their losses and maintain some stability. Seniors are often targeted by fraudsters. Older adults in the U.S. lose more than $36 billion annually to financial fraud. Thank goodness Nevada's is smaller, but we're 3rd in the nation for folks becoming those victims. Having a restitution fund in place proves that Nevada is committed to protecting its citizens from harm. Next, by helping seniors recover their assets, SB 76 enables them to continue contributing to the local economy. And last, the bill ensures that fraudsters are held accountable and victims are not left with nothing. In conclusion, SB 76 would be a lifeline for many Nevadans, providing a fair process for victims to seek financial recovery and reinforces Nevada's commitment to investor protection. I urge you to support SB 76 to protect the financial well-being of all seniors. Please vote yes to pass this bill and send it forward. It is a critical piece of legislation this year. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman, NORMAN, with the Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. Our consumer divisions will have seniors, especially, who come in and have been defrauded, and they think that the law will help us make them whole, but the law can only assign that something wrong happened, and then if there's no money to collect, there's no money to collect. And so this will at least give those people a lifeline where they don't have their entire life savings swindled from them. I ditto the comments of the DAs that were up here and AARP. Please support this legislation. Thank you so much.
All right, I don't see anybody else in Carson City coming down to give in-person support testimony, so we will go to Las Vegas for support testimony. Please remember to give your name and its spelling when you start and limit your remarks to about 2 minutes. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Paul Vargas, V-A-R-G-A-S. Good afternoon, committee members. I am here today on behalf of ARP Nevada to express our strong support for this essential piece of legislation sponsored by the Secretary of State. The bill, titled Fund for the Compensation of Victims of Securities Fraud, is dearly needed. The establishment of this fund is a first critical step towards providing much needed support to the victims of securities fraud in the state of Nevada. By creating a mechanism for compensation, we can help those who have suffered significantly from financial loss due to fraudulent activities. This initiative not only aims to assist the victims in recouping their losses, but also and hopefully their savings. It also enhances the ability to combat fraud in Nevada. Furthermore, this bill will empower the state to capture more criminals by utilizing reports on scam activities. By encouraging victims to come forward, we can gather valuable information that helps law enforcement take decisive action against those who perpetrate these crimes. ARP Nevada believes that this legislation is vital for protecting our community, ensuring justice for victims, and fostering a safer financial environment for all Nevadans. We urge the committee to support this bill and help us take a stand against securities fraud. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next speaker, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, dear Chair and member of the committee. My name is Fayaz Raja, F-A-Y-Y-A-Z, last name R-A-J-A. I'm here as a volunteer for ARP and community advocate. Testimony in support of SB 76. I'm honored to provide testimony in strong support of SB 76, a crucial piece of legislation aimed at addressing the security fraud and providing a relief to the victim. This bill represents a significant step in protecting Nevadan from the increased threat of fraudulent investment scheme, including cryptocurrency scams, pyramid schemes, which harm the seniors, investor, and a business alike. SB 76 creates the fund for the compensation of the victim of the security fraud, which will provide restitution to individuals who have suffered financial losses due to security fraud. This fund will serve as a vital resources for the victim seeking financial recovery and will encourage more people to come forward and support a fraudulent activity. The bill also mandates administrator of the Security Division of the Office of the Secretary of State to review application and distribute compensation from the fund, ensuring an organized and efficient process of victim seeking relief. Additionally, SB 76 enhances transparency and accountability by requiring a division to adopt a regulation for fund administration and submit a biennial report to legislature on its operation. Confidentiality provision within the bill will protect sensitive information, reinforcing trust in the system and encouraging a participation by passing SB 76. Nevada lawmakers have an opportunity to strengthen investor protection, enhance the regulatory oversight, and create a safe financial environment for all residents. I urge you to support this important bill, which will provide a much-needed safety net for victims of security fraud while promoting accountability and transparency in the financial market. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right, I don't see anybody else coming to the table to give support testimony on SB 76, so we will go to the phones for support testimony on SB 76.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to offer support testimony for SB 76, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair and committee members, for the record, I'm Connie McMullen, spelled M-C-M-U-L-L-E-N, Connie, C-O-N-N-I-E, and I represent today the Senior Coalition of Washoe County, comprised of over 30 businesses and nonprofits whose mission is to support the health and well-being of seniors living in Northern Nevada and, of course, the rest of the state. And we would like to go on the record in strong support of Senate Bill 76. And yes, we agree that $25,000 is not very high, but is a good start in starting to combat this horrible situation. I know we can do better in helping our most vulnerable, and I know you all want to do that. So thank you very much for your time and efforts, and thank you for all you do.
There are no further callers to offer testimony at this time.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of support testimony. We will go to testimony in opposition to SB 76. Anybody wishing to give in-person opposition testimony is invited to do so now. But I don't see anybody coming to the table in Las Vegas or Carson City, so we'll go to the phones for opposition testimony on SB 76.
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Okay, then we will go to neutral testimony. Anybody wishing to give neutral testimony is invited to the witness tables now, but I don't see anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas coming to the table. So we'll go to the phones for neutral testimony on SB 76.
Thank you. The public lines are open and working, but there are no callers to offer neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, then that concludes testimony, and I see we have our sponsor back here. I think we may have also had a question, so I'm going to let Senator Lang ask her question of you, and then you can give some closing remarks.
So a few years ago, we passed financial literacy laws, and primarily to help people at the bank and places like that. Can you explain to me how this is different than someone that's scammed in that kind of situation too? Because I could see my constituents coming to me, well, if you're going to take care of them, why aren't you taking care of us?
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Financial literacy is an important part of, I think, preparing for retirement, preparing for the time that you can enjoy your life. However, securities fraud, investment fraud is very different. This is actual protection of those assets. It's the growing of those assets. It's the management of those assets. It goes well beyond the actual financial literacy that we learn from a simple banking transaction to a simple financing contract to understanding a mortgage and those responsibilities. Sometimes investment fraud takes advantage of the fact that investments are very nuanced and they earn the trust of that individual over time. It's not a simple transaction of walking into a bank or a financial institution. This is a relationship that's developed over time with the fraudster and the victim. That takes time. They earn that individual's trust. Once they gain that trust, they start to ask questions about financial stability. They start to ask about their financial situation and then propose opportunities for them to potentially invest. This is a bit different than financial literacy. A lot of times the individual does it because they trust that individual, and that's why we are pretty strong about how we regulate the industry, why we regulate the industry, and we work with our community partners to do that. Again, this is a bit nuanced. This goes beyond financial literacy. This is in the position where somebody has gained your trust, has manipulated you, and taken advantage of you.
Is there any opportunity in that process where someone could interject and say, this isn't right, you shouldn't do this?
Thank you, Senator Cisco Aguilar. Absolutely, and that's why we've kind of readjusted some of the resources, the limited resources that we do have to start education process. We have someone who goes out into some of our communities where we have a large senior population to say, hey, this does occur. Be aware. When you're talking to your investment advisor, make sure they are licensed. If you're not sure they're licensed, please call our office. But if a deal seems too good to be true, call our office and verify that the individual that's selling you the product or the opportunity is legitimate. And so we spend a lot of time because we'd rather invest the resources on education instead of having to go after a fraudster.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. If you have any other closing remarks, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you to our partners at AARP in helping us educate the senior population about this issue. And we look forward to having this as a tool in our toolbox to get more people to come forward so we can hold people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of our hearing on SB 76. I will now close the hearing and move to the last item on our agenda for today, public comment. Anybody wishing to give public comment in person is invited down to the front tables in Carson City and Las Vegas now. I don't see anybody making their way that direction, so we will go to the phones, please, for public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. We will not be meeting tomorrow. Our next meeting will be on Monday at 1 p.m. And until then, we are adjourned.